Is Tudor the poor man's Rolex? I make a lot of videos where I talk about Rolex. I make a lot of videos where I talk about Tudor. Some people might think that I hate on Rolex or even that I hate on Tudor. I don't. I respect both of their brands for what they stand for and what they make. I think they make very high quality watches. However, they may not all be for me. In this video, I'm going to take a look at Tudor, and at the end, I'm going to decide whether or not I think Tudor is the poor man's Rolex. I have a lot to say, and I'm going to start with the history of Tudor. So starting off with the history of Tudor and the original purpose of Tudor. But really, there would be no Tudor if there was no Rolex. There would be no Rolex if it wasn't for Hans Wilsdorf. Hans was a British citizen of German descent, and he founded Rolex in 1905. And they were known for their robustness and their build quality. However, at some point, he realized that the price point of Rolex was on the higher side, and he wanted to reach an audience that couldn't afford his Rolex watches. Enter the idea of Tudor. Hans came up with the idea of Tudor and registered the Tudor name in 1926. The name Tudor refers back to a period of time in England between 1485 and 1603. In 1946, Tudor became an official brand, and it was meant to be a more affordable alternative to Rolex. Initially, Tudor used third-party movements, while Rolex did not. However, Tudor did utilize the Rolex Oyster case and crown. The point of this was to ensure quality at a lower price because the movement did cost less money. Tudor quickly became known for its durability and affordability when compared to brands like Rolex. As Tudor became popular, they produced watches for militaries and professional divers. From the 1960s to the 1980s, several navies issued Tudor Submariners to their divers, including the US Navy SEALs and the French Marine Nationale. Tudor remains as the more affordable sister brand to Rolex. Both brands currently sit under the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation. In recent years, Tudor has embraced its history with heritage models that draw inspiration from classic designs, especially after their reintroduction in the United States. Today's video is brought to you by Chronograbs. If you guys are sick of paying high fees when buying and selling on places like eBay and Chrono24, check out chronograbs.com, where currently there are absolutely no fees buying or selling. That means you get a better price when you are buying and getting a better price when you are selling. So definitely check out chronograbs.com, an enthusiast-based marketplace started by John P. of the John P. YouTube channel, and currently the only marketplace that offers no fees. Definitely check them out at chronograbs.com. So that's a brief history. Now I want to talk about what I love about Tudor. And I do love Tudor. I've owned a number of Tudor over my many years of watch collecting. I love the odd watches that Tudor make. They make the watches that Rolex could not. Rolex have a very slow evolution. People celebrate when they come out with a new dial color. Where other brands evolve a lot quicker, Rolex has been very slow to evolve their designs because the designs work. They're popular for a reason. They're good looking and well made. And obviously that makes a lot of sense that they don't want to break the formula. So they do make a very slow evolution of all of their watches. You definitely can tell a Rolex is a Rolex. It doesn't matter what year it's made. That's not a bad thing, but Tudor aren't bound by those rules. They make watches like the North Flag, a really interesting, quirky, integrated bracelet watch with yellow on the dial. That's something that you don't see very often from Rolex. You get a power reserve. It was one of the first Tudor that you could see the movement in the back. It was pretty cool, and they discontinued that watch. It was inspired by an original design by Tudor, the Tudor Ranger, the original Tudor Ranger with an integrated bracelet. Really cool watch as well. This was somewhat inspired by that watch. I've always wanted to own one, and personally, I think it's a little bit more visually interesting than maybe the new Land Dweller. Some people might argue that. Maybe a lot of people will agree. I'm not entirely sure, but that's how I feel, and I think they are so underrated. Tudor made an alarm watch, the Advisor. They made a reissue of that Advisor, the Heritage Advisor. Really a very different watch from anything that Rolex would make, especially the new versions, which had a very busy dial, but like I said, a really interesting design. The Tudor Advisor, another watch that nobody is talking about and is well under the radar. Another favorite of mine, and a watch that I actually owned for a few years, was the Black Bay P01. It was a prototype that both Rolex and Tudor made. Of course, Tudor, being who they are, they actually reissued the watch. The P01 came from a Commando prototype development program that was set up to solve horological problems for the US Navy in the 1960s. This watch was never made by either brand, Rolex or Tudor. It never went into production, but of course Tudor put it into production. It's a wild watch with a really weird locking system for the bezel, and I like that Tudor made this watch. That's the reason why I bought it. It was so crazy, I thought it was cool. I love the Pelagos. I think that's an awesome watch. I love the use of case materials, carbon fiber, ceramic, titanium, bronze, sterling silver. These are all things that Rolex haven't really done, maybe titanium a little bit, just in a couple of watches, but really they don't use a lot of different materials. It's either precious metals or stainless steel. You're not getting ceramic unless it's a bezel. That's really it. So I love that Tudor can do all of these things that Rolex can't. But by far, the most popular watch that Tudor make is the Black Bay. And the Black Bay, in my opinion, is an homage to a Submariner. Yes, Tudor made a Submariner, and that was an homage, or really just a copy of the Rolex Submariner, and they put a Tudor name on it and of course gave it a generic movement. This is not a bad thing. This was a more affordable version of the Submariner, and those are great watches, and they're very, very collectible and really good looking. And the quality is obviously very, very high because it was made technically by Rolex and Tudor way back when. However, the Black Bay 58, the Black Bay Chrono, the Black Bay Pro, the Black Bay GMT, the Black Bay 1, you can go on and on about the Black Bay. There are so many different versions of them. However, all of them are an homage to a Rolex. The Black Bay 58, the 41, the 43, all of the Black Bays, they are an homage of the Submariner. But ultimately, does that make them a poor man's Rolex? I would say all the watches that I was mentioning before, like the Pelagos and the North Flag, the Advisor and the P01, those are not poor man's Rolexes. Those are original, very original watches from Tudor, and I think those are awesome. In general, an homage is definitely not a bad thing. In fact, so many brands, so many high-end brands, homage Rolex because they are so popular. Why can't Rolex get into the game as well? Why can't Rolex do it with their Tudors? I personally don't love the Tudor Black Bay, but I see the appeal. And in fact, I would say Tudor have become in many ways the enthusiast brand now. Rolex is really not the enthusiast brand anymore. I think there are Rolex enthusiasts. I've made a video about this, but they are few and far between compared to the amount of people who are non-enthusiasts buying Rolex. I think if you are going out and buying a Tudor, you are definitely a watch enthusiast. And it's the enthusiasts that they are going after with Tudor now. So, is it a poor man's Rolex? Well, there's two sides of Tudor, like I just said, the homage side and then that original design side. Both sides are very expensive when you consider everything. And I would say they are definitely not a poor man's Rolex. In fact, I would say that they are the smart man's Rolex. Really, they are the smart man's Tudor. Because if you are an enthusiast, the Tudor is what you go for now because they are as good or almost as good as a Rolex. However, they don't carry the stigma of Rolex, which I think they carry now, in my opinion. And again, this is all my opinion. And I think younger enthusiasts, younger watch collectors are looking to Tudor and not seeing Rolex. They are seeing a really well-made dive watch, a really well-made chronograph or GMT that might look a little bit like a Rolex and have ties to Rolex, but they are true watch enthusiasts and they want to own something really nice, really well made, something reliable, something durable, and it's Tudor, no longer Rolex. And Tudor is not the poor man's Rolex. Maybe a lot of you thought I would be going in the other direction and saying that they were. I don't believe they are. And again, I'm not hating on Rolex. Like I said, there are plenty of enthusiasts out there. There are plenty of people who still love Rolex. But I think there are more and more people loving Tudor for what they are, not because what they stand for. In other words, not because of marketing, not because people will recognize it on your wrist. They are buying them because they are really good watches, and sometimes they might look like a Rolex, which is not a bad thing. Tell me what you guys think down in the comments below. I want to hear from you guys. What do you think about what I said in this video? Again, this is a watch conversation video. I do these a lot, so please don't yell at me in the comments. This is just my opinion. I love Rolex, I love Tudor, and I might like Tudor a little bit better than Rolex at this point. But I mean, that's just me, again, and my opinion. Tell me what you think down in the comments below. I'd like to have a conversation with you. And again, please don't yell at me in the comments. That's really it, guys. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for logging on. Thank you for commenting. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell icon. It's super helpful for the channel, and I very much appreciate it. And that's really it. I'll catch you guys in the next video.